Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first live Dev AMA. Um, Today, we're going to be talking about some really cool topics, primarily focused around the driver adapters feature for Prisma ORM, both like how it works right now and then how we're going to sort of see that happen in the future. Right now on screen, you can see our Dev AMA channel in our Discord. Please, if you want to ask some questions and have us answer them live, hop over there. I'm going to post a link so people can connect there and chat with us today. But first, what I'd love for us to do is just do a quick round of introductions. We have some people who are familiar faces in our live streams and some people who are not. Hey, Will, why don't you take it away and chat with us?
Sure. Thanks for having me here today, John. My name is Will. I'm the engineering manager for the Prisma ORM team. I've been with the company for about 4 months. I'm originally from Australia and I live in Germany. And I've been a long-time application developer and I've used Prisma in production multiple times. So it's very exciting for me to be here and be a part of this, working from the other side of the divide for a change.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Alberto, you mind introducing yourself as well?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Roberto Esquivel. I've been working with Prisma for the past 3 years or so. I'm originally from Italy, and I've been following Prisma's footsteps actually ever since it was called GraphQL. So yeah, it's kind of a long time.
Awesome. And Jacek.
Yep. Hi, everyone. My name is Jacek. I'm a Rust engineer, mostly Rust, but also some TypeScript at the Prisma ORM team. I joined Prisma for about 4 months ago. Before working with Rust, I used to be a Scala developer. Yeah, that's
Awesome.
pretty much it for me.
Great. Thank y'all so much. And welcome to everyone who's filtering into the chat. Hope that we're going to be able to answer a lot of your questions. But let's start it off by sort of setting the stage here. If y'all wouldn't mind answering, what exactly are driver adapters? And how are Prisma folks going to be using them, and why should they even care?
Can I take this?
And anyone can. You're more than welcome.
All right. So driver adapters ultimately are a way for users to have more flexible ways of connecting to databases. The idea is that they can ship their own connector, and they can use that as long as there is a common interface that Prisma is able to understand. Of course, we will also support a bunch of Java adapters. So these interfaces for very well-known connectors in the Node.js ecosystem, for instance, PG, libsql client, etc.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's kind of where it started. Do I need to give some historical context as well, or?
So I think that leads me into my next question, Alberto, which is this feature, the driver adapters preview feature, has been present for a while now in Prisma ORM, roughly almost a year, I think. So why all the attention now? What's sort of like bringing our attention back to this feature?
Right. So I would say when we first released the driver adapters preview feature, it was maybe a little bit experimental, premature for that time. We were playing with the idea of being able to use JavaScript drivers, because so far, if we only consider the stable Prisma features for the Prisma client, actually under the hood, what happens is that we offload the logic and the I/O and functionality that is executed at runtime to a binary. This binary, you might have heard the term query engine somewhere. You might have heard of the Prisma engines. What's the catch with that? The catch is that we essentially bundle a bunch of Rust drivers that connect to databases, and like there are 5, 6 of them all in this one binary, and it's quite big. It presents certain troubles, especially if you need to deploy to a serverless environment, to AWS Lambda. The larger the binary, the longer it takes for the application to load. And it's also not compatible at all with edge platforms such as Cloudflare Workers and Vercel Edge. And that transition in the, I'll say, in the market for our ecosystem actually really prompted us to find a new alternative architecture. And that brought us to the driver adapters, so JavaScript drivers plus some interface for us to use.
That was actually a really big surprise for me when I first started using Prisma. I had just assumed as a naive TypeScript developer that Prisma was written in TypeScript, but actually most of the logic is written in Rust, compiled to a binary, which is what you were just referring to, that the client uses internally, right?
Yeah, precisely. There are historical reasons, but yeah, that's the case. And we are progressively migrating towards thinner and thinner layers. We don't want to the people to have to download a bunch of things that they don't necessarily use at development time and runtime. We want to move towards a more plug and play approach.
Yeah, and that's awesome, Alberto, and thank you so much. And I'll point it over to you, Will, because you've been inside of our blog, inside of GitHub, sort of talking about this new direction and like how this project's coming along. Are you able to give us any updates there, or chat about sort of how driver adapters is maybe evolving right now?
Yeah. So the original incarnation of driver adapters was it's a thing that you plug into the Prisma client that lets it talk to your database from the JavaScript execution environment, right? We're currently working on a new implementation of the Prisma client that gets rid of the Rust native binary. What we're going to provide instead is a WebAssembly cross-compiled implementation of the database communication logic. And this is what's going to be talking to your driver adapters for you. Driver adapters are gaining a lot of importance right now because that's going to be the only way that we'll talk to the database for you. And this has a bunch of advantages for users. The biggest one is that in our previous implementation of the Prisma client, there was a lot of back and forth between the JavaScript execution environment and the Rust execution environment. When the Rust environment goes and gets your data from the database, then has to serialize it again to pass it back across the gap to the JavaScript execution environment where you receive it as objects. We're getting rid of all of that. We're calling this project the query compiler because it has a couple of other properties where it will take the query you ask it to do and convert it, compile it into a intermediate representation, and then do some clever things with that. But this thing is going to be all in WebAssembly, so everything lives in the JavaScript execution environment. That thing, we started work on it in the last quarter. We released a very, very early access proof of concept a few days ago. You can check it out in the code base if you want. It's not really usable for production yet, but in the next quarter, in the next 3 months, we plan to take that from its early access roots to as close to GA as we can get it. It'll at least be a preview feature, but we hope to ship Prisma version 7 in the next 3 months, where this will become the default method for talking to your database. That means driver adapters are going to be front and center for everybody. And everything is going to get faster and smaller and more compatible with edge runtimes and any other runtime where you don't want to have a native Rust binary running in the background. That answer your question, John?
No, it answered my question and then some. That's really exciting that we're hearing here for the first time. Prisma 7 is looming on the horizon. So no, that's super exciting that we're going to be focusing on, hey, we're keeping the Prisma ORM experience, the developer experience, really front and center, while also trimming it down and making it a smaller and smaller footprint, let's say, on your application. And on that note, Will, I think I understood correctly from internal benchmarks, we're seeing a reduction from, at what is in some cases an up to 15 megabyte footprint down to, was it 750 kilobytes? I'm trying to remember the exact numbers there.
I think I'll handball this to Alberto and Jacek, who probably have a better idea of the exact benchmarks than I do.
Yeah, I think Jacek has the right number.
I don't have the number. I mean, there is a reduction though. There is a reduction for sure though, in the size. But I think the numbers right now might be it might be too early to look at them. But we will have some reduction for sure.
Okay, awesome. So some reduction. How much that is to be determined.
Well, I think with the native binaries, it was something in the order of 10 or 13 megs or something. And with the query compiler, it's something like 700 kilobytes.
Okay.
So it's an order of magnitude difference.
Awesome. That's great. Well, yeah, then I guess, the last question, well, I guess I have two more questions. One is about the driver adapters we currently have. And then moving on from that, let's talk about, third-party driver adapters. So right now, I know that two pretty big ones in the community are Terso and D1. How is our current direction sort of helping those driver adapters? Maybe Jacek, if you have, or Alberto, you want to chat about that?
So how is it helping? Well, so it's not really helping individual driver adapters. It's more of like a overall improvement for all of them, really, because we're not changing the individual driver adapters. We're just changing how they're being used. So prior to this, and in fact, as of right now, we have not even changed the driver adapters. We are using them for the query compiler the same way they were, the way they are implemented is the same as before we even had the query compiler. So the driver adapters themselves look more or less the same, and they are being called in more or less the same way. It's just they're not being called from a binary; they're being called from basically a piece of JavaScript code. So, and most of the runtime code that is in fact responsible for running queries is just JavaScript. So we have like a query interpreter and just a piece of JavaScript code. There is some complicated logic that the query engine used to do that revolves around generating the queries, basically transforming whatever the user writes in TypeScript into a query plan, which might involve a single query or multiple queries. So that part has been delegated to basically like a WASM library. And this query interpreter that we have that runs in JavaScript, it basically takes this WASM library and invokes it, basically gets a query plan out of this WASM binary, and everything else is done in JavaScript.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Can I add something here?
Oh, please. Yeah, Alberto.
Yeah. So about third-party driver adapters, one thing we're also spending some time on is refining the public interface that each driver adapter should comply to. The idea is to kind of declutter certain things that should probably not have leaked in the first place, make it a bit easier for other people to implement it. And we also want to document this properly. Right? Like right now, we document something, but of course, it's only it's still a preview feature, so it's not extensive. But yeah, the idea is that we want to welcome the community to ship their own driver adapters and just have this plug and play approach into Prisma. Well, of course, we will still maintain and release our own driver adapters for like the major players that we identify that make sense for Prisma to maintain.
Yeah, so
awesome.
I could just add one more thing to John's question because I think I didn't answer it. So there is one new functionality that was not possible before, and that's perform migrations with driver adapters. So the existing driver adapter interface that we had was pretty limited, and it was actually not designed to be able to run migrations. So it was not possible to perform migrations with them. So their capability was limited to running queries. So what we are enabling now is, and what we have to enable in order to get rid of the REST binaries, we have to be able to use the Java adapters in migrations. And
Awesome.
there is some new things we will have to add to the driver adapters in order to basically achieve that. But yeah, from the user's point of view, driver adapters will sort of look similar. We just add some new functionality to them, where the user will be able to perform migrations using driver adapters. And that way we will eliminate the need for native drivers entirely.
Which
Awesome.
I think was the first question, right? From
Yeah. So I was actually just about to summarize all of what we've just said and say that, with the driver adapters feature, where, as you said, Will, that will be the way we communicate with databases in the future. And we've sort of then talked about what we're going to be able to do with these driver adapters and with these JS drivers. So it's more than just querying, it's also migrations, and it's moving all of the logic that was in, in our Rust binary out of that. So Summer had the first question here. Does it mean the end of binaries? Yes, it means the end of binaries. We're going to see the driver adapters and JavaScript drivers being put front and center. And then, as Alberto mentioned, if you have a specific database that doesn't quite work with, Prisma, the ORM, you'll be able to create your own driver adapter to hook everything up. And, my job will be to make that as documented as possible so that it's a good experience for our community. But I'll sort of then continue this train. Summer has asked about what's the advantage of using WASM here. I think I know the answer to this, but I am not an engineer, so I will point it over to you.
Yeah, I would say the most obvious answer is it allows us to reuse lots of logic that already exists in a language different than TypeScript, and that language is Rust, without having to port it entirely. Not just port the implementation, but also port the extensive suite of tests. Now, some refactoring is still needed because WebAssembly notoriously doesn't allow any input and output. So you cannot just open a connection to a database from within there. That's why we need to resort to a JavaScript implementation to do that. And it's executing WebAssembly is quite fast in modern JavaScript runtimes. It has been an area of improvement of every major JavaScript engine, especially V8, the one underlying Node.js. And also the WebAssembly bytecode is quite simple. Like the CPU instructions there are quite easy and fast to parse and execute. But it's not the main reason why we did that. The main reason why we choose WebAssembly is to avoid rewriting things from scratch.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing to this, which is that because there was a part of the question about the advantage of using WASM. So there are some big advantages of using WASM as opposed to Rust binaries, because Rust binaries, they are platform specific. So you're compiling it for a specific platform. So every binary can only run a single platform. That's one major disadvantage. When you compile WASM, this single WASM library can run on anything. It's like Java. You can run it on any device that has a WASM interpreter. And the second part is there's lots of environments. There's lots of sort of sandbox runtimes where you can't run your own native code. Like even if you could give them a binary, some runtimes just don't support it. Like I think WASM workers in Cloudflare don't let you just run like a custom binary. So that enables more users to use Prisma on platforms that don't necessarily allow you to use like arbitrary binaries.
Yeah, that's totally true. Probably I implicitly referred to it earlier, but when I said that Java adapters was also born in order to support edge environments like Cloudflare Workers and Vercel Edge, that was precisely the reason. Like those sandboxes they don't allow you to have any, essentially, you cannot have any native binding. You cannot have any call to the file system. You cannot have any call to like a libc. You cannot do that. Whereas WebAssembly is something that runs within the JavaScript execution environment, as Will said earlier. So that's totally allowed.
Awesome. Well, cool. Then, but before our AMA started, some people filtered in some questions, so I'm going to kind of go back to some previous questions and hopefully answer those. I think, Will, this is probably best for you to answer, and that's, how has the roadmap for this project evolved over the past month? Since we said that, hey, we're going to be developing this right now, and then alongside how has that not evolved? What good things have already come from the new strategy? I think we've heard a little bit about that already, but I'm interested in just sort of like tying it all together.
Well, those are big questions. How has the roadmap changed in the last month? Well, we're coming to a close in the roadmap that we posted 3 months ago, and we didn't quite achieve everything that was on our list, but we got all the big components done. In the last month, we've been really looking at the year forward, and we've got some big ambitions on the horizon, which aren't super related to driver adapters. But what is really related is this whole like focusing and doubling down on the query compiler strategy. We've decided we want this to be the only way that Prisma works going forward. We usually have a fairly gradual process of rolling out major changes, and this time we want to get from basically a standing start to GA in under 3 months, and that is a huge deal. We want to get a nice little buffer of time as a preview feature in there as well, so it might even be something like getting it to GA in 2 months, so we've got a bit of time to have any bugs roll in before it becomes like the only way that you can do business with Prisma. From that, we recognize the importance of driver adapters, how we're going to work them into the CLI, and all of the new avenues that this opens up for us. We can build driver adapters for Torso and D1, which was never possible before. People have had to hack around Prisma to run their migrations separately. We'll be able to accept community-contributed driver adapters for databases we don't have the capacity to support. Yeah, so that's like the thinking that's been going on around the roadmap for the next 3 months. The other thing we've done is we've narrowed down a bunch of new preview features we want to roll out to GA. We have something like 10 of them, 10 preview features at the moment. We want to deliver at least 4 of them in the next 3 months. We expect it to be views, multi-schema, the Prisma schema folder, and something else. What was the fourth one?
Yeah, I think we're gonna deprecate 2 of them.
Oh yeah, we're also going to deprecate metrics and
Dino.
Dino, which isn't to say we won't support Dino, just like the preview feature that's supposed to add support for Dino deploy.
Yeah.
We don't need it anymore. Prisma works with Dino. So there's that. Oh, and the other big surprise that came out of our work this last quarter was the config file.
All right.
We realized we needed a way of specifying driver adapters that you will use for your CLI commands. So, okay, we added a config file where you can write some configuration. And then we realized that this is the perfect opportunity to start getting rid of some of Prisma's historical but confusing behaviors. Like, just let people tell you where the schema file is. Don't search a bunch of hard-coded directories for it. Just get it from there. We have hundreds of issues in the repository of people who are trying to load their .env files, but the wrong file is loaded, or the file they want isn't found, or they're in a mono repo and they have some other behavior they need, or this, that, and the other condition. We're going to stop loading your .env files for you. That is not something you should rely on your ORM for. But to keep it really easy for people who want that behavior, you just stick that one line, like import.env, in the top of your config file. All the same behavior you have now will go ahead and happen. If you want to customize that behavior, you write whatever logic you want. So we're going to really build on this config file starting point to give users more control and to make more of the implicit behaviors Prisma has historically had explicit and overridable.
Awesome. Yeah, and for people who are interested in the Prisma config file that was released just this past Tuesday in Prisma 6.4. So definitely go and give that a look and give us feedback on what you think about the feature.
It's got a big early access label on it because we want feedback now. We expect that the exact structure of the config file will change. The names of some keys and properties will change. We will add more properties. Maybe some of them will disappear. But it is reliable and it works, and it does exactly what you'd expect.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for that. In there, you did touch on, how the driver adapters and the Prisma config are sort of helping to enable the CLI and CLI commands. We had a question come in asking about sort of programmatic access or programmatic control of these CLI functions. Is that something we're thinking about whilst we're going down this driver adapter path?
Maybe I can say something about that. So it is not our direct goal, but it is enabled by some of the work we're currently doing. Specifically, that integration between that part of our logic written in Rust that deals with migration and introspection, integrated with driver adapters. Because the idea is that just like we have an engine for the Prisma client, we have a separate one. We call it the Schema engine. That essentially is invoked by the Prisma DB pull and push commands and the Prisma migrate dev, migrate deploy, etc. commands. Right now, it's just this huge binary that exposes lots of functionality. And the idea is that we're breaking it down into a WebAssembly file that will expose a bunch of functions. And eventually, we should be able to quite easily expose those functions to individual JavaScript functions as well. That will take some input, and you could use that as you want programmatically. Again, this was not like the this was not necessarily intended. It's just a positive outcome of some research and discoveries and implementation we've been doing.
Awesome.
I'll say lots of work that we're currently tackling needs to support, I'll say, small and midterm concerns, but we always have an eye for long-term concerns or for issues that have been open for a long time and we weren't able to really approach because the architecture we previously had or maybe the vision we previously had didn't quite coincide with those issues or features. So yeah, there's that.
Oh, speaking of which, one more thing coming up in this quarter's roadmap is ESM support, which should solve a lot of problems for a lot of people and make bundling the Prisma output much, much simpler.
I'm
totally
certain that's going to be the clip of the day. So that's a great question, great thinking. Yeah, so Luke just put a question in our chat, and I'm wondering, maybe Jacek, as a previous Rust and Scala developer, why the focus on TypeScript? Is this just a flash in the pan type thing, or has been working with moving things into TypeScript shown benefits?
I think the goal is, the TypeScript community is huge and it has a massive ecosystem and it has massive adoption. And when you write TypeScript, it can be deployed to there's so many products that offer deployments of JavaScript and TypeScript code bases. So I think that is probably like one of the main reasons why it's so advantageous to choose JavaScript. I think Will might be able to provide a better answer for this.
I saw he just
Well-
commented in a thread there as well. So I think he has indeed commented on it.
I think you nailed it, Jacek. Like, there are so many applications being developed with JavaScript and TypeScript. Prisma had reached the point where our initial goal was to have one core set of logic that you can write any potential language, you can generate any potential language client for it. That got like exponentially more complex as we added more database support, more database primitive support, more query logic, because everything had to be implemented in one place that needed to know about all of these different potential, this like matrix of databases and their respective features and primitives and stuff. It reached a point where we couldn't really continue in this vein. We couldn't add any more features because it had gotten so complicated. So what we decided to do was focus on one output, which is TypeScript, which meant now we can start unbundling all of those previously coupled together types of database and feature support. So in the distant future, instead of having one Prisma client that can handle anything, where you'll only use a small portion of that executable code, you'll be able to say from the beginning, I want a client that's going to connect to a Postgres database or SQLite or whatever, and I need it to have these features. And your generation process will produce a highly optimized output for you that just gives you the things you need for your application. In the really distant future, we want to enable the community to create their own generation targets and their own language primitives. So you can use your highly expressive declarative Prisma schema to say, okay, I want this new primitive that didn't previously exist. Like maybe you want to use model repositories and you name that yourself, you write your own generation logic, and that just gets bundled into the Prisma pipeline. And what you get in your application is a usable output customized for your application.
Awesome.
Answer question?
Yeah, as I said before, that and more. So I think actually that's sort of what you said there at the end answered a question that we had in the chat previously, which was talking about expansions to the schema language, and and the ability to support things like triggers and sequences within the Prisma schema language, like right within the data model. And so it sounds like the answer to are we expanding that isn't directly yes, but it's will allow you to do so.
Well, let's maybe distinguish between dreams for a distant future and what's coming up in the realistic future, which I think is what this person's asking about, right?
Right.
He said, are there plans for adding support for triggers and sequences? Broadly, yes. It's not on the roadmap for the next 3 months. It might be for the rest of the year, but it's not our priority right now either.
Yeah.
Similar for multiple data sources. I would love to hear more about like what the use case is for this. And yes, you're right, there are workarounds. I can't envision that we're going to have multiple data sources in one Prisma client, but I do think it is completely reasonable for an application to want to define multiple Prisma clients, one for each data source, where the schema that you're describing applies only to one particular database. And you have one client managing one connection to one database. One database has its own set of migrations, its own schema. That I totally see happening.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, so now, again, folks who are watching, please feel free to join our Discord. I'm going to post another link in YouTube and X so that you can jump in here and ask questions. We're focusing mainly on driver adapters, but I'd like to maybe open up our scope a little bit to like kind of how that enables the future of the ORM and sort of, how we're thinking about the ORM moving forward. Alberto, you've I think of everyone here, you've been at Prisma the longest. What
Mhm.
sort of excites you about this direction? Are you what? How do I say this? Like, what are you doing now to like really help yourself down the road, and maybe why does that excite you?
So the exciting bit for me is that we are no longer relying on the legacy of Prisma. Like Prisma was conceived at a certain time with certain constraints, caveats, and vision. And for certain areas that worked very well, Prisma became quite famous. It became adopted. The DX is widely considered a great DX, right? But for some scenarios, certain architectural decision of that time hindered the ability to support new features, or like they kind of shaped the way that those features were implemented, putting certain constraints, right? The exciting bit is that we are removing one constraint at a time. So I think that really enables us to experiment more, to be more creative, to also dare more. Like we are in the past we suffer from being a bit too stuck in certain preview features for a long time, and now we're daring more. We want to only ship things in preview feature for a relatively short amount of time, just enough to gather feedback, but without kind of totally kind of forgetting about it, moving on to our own things, and then maybe 1 year later go back to it and say, oh yeah, we had this, maybe we could do something about it. Yeah, I think we're really correcting our path in there, and we are shaping up for a very new successful products. Also, we are making sure that the products we're realizing within the open source community also complement the products that are offered, like the paid products that are offered by Prisma. So that's also quite exciting. It's important for a company to thrive, as well as to continue the open source investment.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think I'm personally really excited. I know, Will, we've talked about this one-on-one so many times that this new direction is going to unlock a ton of Prisma community members who have said, like, I really would love to contribute, but I'm unable to because half the code base is in Rust. And being able to contribute to the project and say, hey, um, Prisma doesn't work great with, this kind of database. I am going to put forward this driver adapter that I think solves this issue. What do you think? I think that's going to be really great at unlocking a lot of awesome paths in the future.
Yeah, well, like returning to the question, I think Maverick asked earlier about why we chose TypeScript. The result of taking this common core that was this Rust binary and splitting it up into multiple pieces is that all of those pieces are going to become bit by bit more accessible to the community. They'll be easier to understand what's going on. More of them will be written in TypeScript than is currently the case. And it will be clearer where the points of extension are, where community members can come in and build their own solutions to stuff that they want.
Awesome.
What's our next question?
That is what I'm trying to pull up right now, and I've lost my little document that had all of them. So, yeah, I mean, I think if we go back to driver adapters and sort of working in this, I guess we're calling it like a JS native drivers. Are I think you maybe answered this, Alberto, but I sort of want to clarify. The drivers themselves are not something we'll be managing anymore. So you can use your favorite that you've used in the past. Like, are these going to be like fairly replaceable, or are we going to have very specific driver adapters for very specific drivers? The example I have in my head is like Postgres.js. Is that going to need a very specific driver, or is it just like any Postgres driver will work.
Yeah, the idea is that you need to have, there will be one driver adapter for each JavaScript driver that you want to provide support for. So why is that? Because the API of PG versus Postgres.js versus some other Postgres client out there or Postgres driver out there, those are different. What we need is actually to take that functionality exposed by those clients, provide kind of wrap that functionality in methods with a common interface that the core code of Prisma is able to understand, and then let Prisma programmatically invoke those functions whenever Prisma decides. And how does Prisma decide which functions to call with which parameters? It all boils down to that query compiler from before that we discussed before. From that translation process, we translate the Prisma query, which is prisma.user.findMany, etc. That gets converted into an intermediate representation. From that representation, we know which functions and which parameters we want to essentially invoke on the driver adapter. And on the Prisma side, we don't know which driver is used under the hood. We only know that it complies to a certain interface. So yeah, long story short, you need one driver adapter for each client you want to provide support for, each driver.
Yeah, and I think that directly leads into two questions that have just come through about the I'm assuming bun driver, you mean like the bun.sql functionality that was recently released, and then the MySQL 2 as well. I don't think that we're able to specifically say like here's the list of driver adapters we're going to be giving you right now, but I think and I'm going to answer this, and then please someone jump in when I'm inevitably wrong. It's going to be a fairly well-trodden path to implement, say, a driver adapter for MySQL 2, if that's what you would prefer, or if you're solely running in Bun and you only want to use the bun.sql driver, like making a driver adapter for that will just follow the same path that we have for the other driver adapters.
Yeah, I mean, just to add one more thing, we do intend to have driver adapters for vanilla libraries like MySQL 2 or Bun, but I imagine we probably just pick one library for each database. So we probably have one adapter for MySQL. We're probably not gonna implement adapters for like different libraries out there. So we probably just have one for each database.
Good to know. Yeah. So to answer the questions, yes, I would expect these driver adapters, but if we choose PG over Postgres.js, that sort of gap would need to be filled by the community. The good news on that is as we said with our direction, filling that gap is a lot easier. So
That's the goal.
Awesome. Well, cool. Yeah, I think then let's sort of continue on that thread then of sort of the different drivers and driver adapters that we're let's say supporting right now. Maybe Will, do you have as we're moving from our early access like proof of concept phase, what are we focusing on first and foremost for this like if someone wants to get something working end to end, what kind of stack are we focusing on?
I guess those are kind of two different questions, right? What are we focusing on first? Our priority for this quarter is to get the query compiler project to GA, along with its client-side driver adapter support, and to restructure the CLI to enable CLI time driver adapters as well. What that means for users is one of our first priorities is to enable support for things like D1 and Terso CLI commands, which have historically been missing. So that stack can be, I mean, whatever you want. Yeah, I guess we're not really focusing on a specific stack here. We're trying to enable more general purpose support. But D1 and Terso are some of our early targets because that we have underserved them so far. We want to ship something that makes a bit of a splash first. You're muted.
I sure am muted. Thank you. I'm really excited to see D1 support. Definitely had a lot of interesting workarounds to get migrations working, stuff like that. So really excited to see us moving in that direction and having things work as we expect. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much. And maybe let's our very near term focus is on the databases that we can connect to. We talked about previously that this is going to work in a lot of different environments, and you just said that, hey, we already work in Dino, we don't need this preview feature anymore. Are we testing those different environments as well as we're testing sort of the database connections, or is that sort of the step after we're getting the database working?
I don't think I understood that question. When you say testing, what do you mean?
Sorry, so maybe I shouldn't have used the word testing. Let's say our near-term focus is making the connection between Prisma ORM, this new architecture for Prisma ORM, and the databases to be, as you put it, much more well-served, much more feature complete. Are we also focusing on different in those that working well in different environments, or is that a new step after databases?
I think Alberto wanted to answer this question, but yes, we're absolutely focusing on new environments.
First of all, just a clarification, by environment, do you mean a JavaScript runtime different than Node.js?
That's correct, yes. So I sometimes edge environments, sometimes non-standard environments. There's a lot of ways you can phrase that. Maybe less maybe now very standard environments.
Then yes, some of those environments have, I would say, higher priority compared to others. For instance, we have a higher priority on working on edge environments, and that would be Versal Edge and Cloudflare Workers. And then there are a few others, but those are like the two most famous ones. Mostly because so many, I would say, so many new projects are being developed in that area. So many new talks have been spoken about around the community. There's hype in that direction, right? And we don't want to miss out on that hype. We don't want to let people down who want to contribute to the niche. And I'm also one of those people. I want to be able to properly use Prisma in those platforms. Whereas when it comes to other runtimes, for instance, I love using Bun personally, and many things work out of the box with Bun. I'm not sure whether we test it explicitly, but I know that we have some tests for Dino. And the happy thing about Dino is that Dino 2, which has been released a few months ago, if I remember correctly, already solved so many issues that we previously had with Dino 1. And those issues eventually also stemmed from the fact that our ESM support was quite lacking. And there's a reason for that, because we were essentially handcrafting TypeScript to JavaScript transformations within the Prisma client code base. It's something that I don't think any other ORM does. And that, on one hand, that is a quite powerful mechanism. On the other, it really bites us back whenever we need to kind of adjust to the innovations within the TypeScript community and JavaScript community. So yeah, I hope that clarifies it. Node.js and Edge environments are our priorities, and the others, we want to support them, but we don't really have a very well-defined plan at the moment. We have some other priorities that we want to roll out first.
Well, there are some key things that we're doing that will help us across basically all environments, which you can summarize essentially as we're doing less weird shit.
Yeah.
Like, we're not shipping native binaries anymore. we'll probably stop messing around in node modules sometime in the very near future. Like this causes problems for people all over the place. We're not going to load your environment variables for you, like you do that. Just a lot of behaviors that are problematic for a lot of people, whether they're working in edge environments or mono repos or whatever combination of effects means they're posting a new GitHub issue in our repository. We're getting rid of a lot of that behavior and making the whole thing smaller footprint, more predictable, fewer things that you need to account for if you want to use it in whatever your setup is.
Yeah, we make fewer, in other words, we make fewer assumptions about the environment we're going to run in, because in principle, we're moving towards a point where we'll be able to run anywhere that supports executing WebAssembly and allows it to instantiate a driver. So that, in principle, those are the two things you need to be able to do in your runtime for like sort of the future Prisma to work. So we have so fewer requirements.
It's awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, I think you know, we're coming up on almost the end of our time here, but I still want to leave us open for any last minute questions that we can sort of chat about. But you know, I think that for folks who are interested in sort of our progress with this new query compiler project and driver adapters being the main way of communicating with databases, do look out for a post on our blog, most likely next week, maybe the week after, that discusses how this process has been going and sort of what our initial benchmarks sort of say there. Maybe as a sneak peek, Will, Alberto, Jacek, is there anything that stood out there in those benchmarks or in that new methodology that sort of you want to provide as a sneak peek to folks?
I can point out one thing, which is that one thing we noticed that as you increase the data you're querying, the difference goes larger and larger, where I think we had a benchmark of 10,000 rows. It was like 5 or 6 times faster with the query compiler, because the reason we see this particular difference is because the old workflow used to be that we had this binary that used to like communicate all this data back and forth. So everything you pull from your database, it would be communicated back and forth. So that causes the slowdown where you're working with large data sets. So the query compiler eliminates a lot of that. That's why the difference is particularly big when you're running queries that retrieve lots of data. And there the difference can be huge for some users.
Another thing when it comes to bundle size. So when I talk about bundle size, I mean the gzip size of your project, like a minimal project that uses Prisma. So for Cloudflare workers, for Universal Edge, with the Java adapters preview feature, we used to have this WASM version of the query engine. I'm just talking about the thing that actually programmatically calls these Java adapters. This is a different thing than the new query compiler, right? We're talking about the past. And we really spent quite some time trying to get rid of stuff so that the bundle size will fit within the free tier limits of Cloudflare workers, which is 1 megabyte. By now, they also updated it to like 3 megabytes, but that's not the point. The point is, we reached I think 820 kilobytes, 830 kilobytes. That was kind of the average around our main Java adapters, like PG, libsql, and Postgres, and PlanetScale. Turns out that with the query compiler, we are able to have more things on top of it and still have a smaller bundle size. So we are really getting optimizations both in terms of runtime and in terms of bundle size, which is quite great.
Awesome. So get more in a smaller package. That seems like pretty ideal. Awesome. Well, let's sort of begin wrapping up here. Will, let's start with you. Any final thoughts, or maybe how can the community best help us, move forward with the project? What are your asks of the community, let's say?
Well, that's a good question. I hadn't really thought about that before. First ask is like, please leave a reproduction if you want to file a bug report. I'm going through those by hand, and it is really hard to understand and verify somebody's bug report if there is no reproducible information. Beyond that, the biggest thing that we can ask for is feedback. We are doing a lot of ambitious stuff in the next 3 months and in 2025. We are doing our best to anticipate your needs and to cater to them. Some of them are very obvious. Others are not so clear. And if we make a choice, we try and put it out early so we can get your feedback. If you don't like something, let us know. If it hasn't quite hit the mark, but it would with a little tweak, that is exactly the kind of information we need.
Yeah, and then I think that's really a great theme to bring home for the next few months and really the next year is it's feedback. It's all feedback, and we're going to be developing things that people have been asking for quite a long time. And if I think the difference that I'm seeing is we're putting something out there and we're saying, does this match what you need? And that's an exciting thing to be able to get that feedback back to us, to say, yes, it does. Or as you said, Will, like, kind of, could you change this one thing though? That's all really, really exciting. Maybe Will, one more question. And I think you answered this earlier, but maybe let's just sort of answer it again about when are we expecting Prisma 7 and sort of what's like, why are we even talking about a Prisma 7?
We are talking about a Prisma 7 because we are working hard to ship our new query compiler, a new implementation of the Prisma client, and our new implementation of the Prisma CLI, both of which will no longer require Rust binaries. That makes them usable in a lot more places, more efficient, more open to extension by us in the future, and hopefully by the community. All of this we're going to package up and drop in Prisma 7. We expect that to go out in May.
That's you bold. Yeah, it's about to say bold. You put a month to it. That's a very bold.
You know what they say about software estimates.
So sometime between tomorrow and the end of the year.
I never said which year it was.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Fair enough.
No, I'm kidding. May 2025.
Awesome. Well, yeah, Will, Alberto, Jacek, thank you all so much for all of your time, for helping me answer these questions and being good sports. Yeah, and thank you to everyone watching. We're really thankful to have an awesome community here at Prisma, and thank you very much for your questions. We are going to have another AMA where we're still planning on having one every single month. Do check out our Discord. Sharing that again. Sorry that it's cutting off your face, Jacek. I noticed it did that. I felt really bad. But we're going to have another AMA every single month. In our Dev AMA channel that you see on screen, we'll be collecting, those responses and those questions. So do please join our Discord and sort of get your questions in for next month's AMA.
And a big thank you to you, John, for your tireless work setting this up and for being our charming host throughout the video.
I'm just going to say that flattery will get you nowhere, but I do appreciate it very much. Yeah, so thanks everyone. That'll do it for us today. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, John. Take care. Cheers.
Yep. Cheers. Bye.
Well, good job.